once again, we're waking up to news of another mass shooting.
Hurry up! 29 lives lost, 29 families shattered. It's a cycle that's become predictable.
People are struggling for answers in the wake of this attack inside a synagogue here.
Funerals, then vigils, then calls to change gun laws. And then another mass shooting. Hey, Rhonda, how are you? I sat down with two people who see guns quite differently. Rhonda Ezell has lived on the south side of Chicago all her life. What is it like now? How would you describe it?
It's a lot of gang violence.
Rhonda is also a proud member of the National Rifle Association and has actually won 2 federal lawsuits against the city of Chicago to protect her right to own guns. Have you ever had to use it?
No, absolutely not. And I hope I don't ever have to use a firearm. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to be prepared.
She's sharing her passion for guns with her 9-year-old granddaughter.
When she goes to college, it's not going to be a me too. It's going to be a not me.
31-year-old Brandon Wolf is a survivor of the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida. You remember the gunfire that vividly?
Yeah. It's something that you can not only see, you can hear, but you can feel it.
2 of Brandon's best friends were among the 49 people killed. He's now made it his mission to change gun laws, recently testifying before Congress.
People who shouldn't have guns don't get them.
You were the survivor of one of the deadliest shootings in American history, and you have fought to protect gun rights through 2 lawsuits and won them both. Why agree to sit down and talk to each other?
Why not? Yeah. At some point in time, America has to realize that just because you may not see eye to eye with an individual doesn't mean that you can't sit down at the table and communicate. We all want to be safe. We want the violence to stop. And we don't want mentally ill people who are a threat to themselves and others to have firearms. There's 3 things right there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We may not always agree on how to get there.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Rhonda and I agree that we want our communities to be safer.
If we can agree on those things, then why can't we advance the conversation?
Because what's happening in America right now is it's all politicized.
On both sides?
It's way bigger on every side.
The conversation turned to how the Second Amendment should be interpreted.
The Second Amendment is not a Republican thing. It's not a Democrat thing. It's an American thing.
What about those who would say that the Second Amendment was written at a time when it took, I think, 13 seconds to reload a musket, and that the founders never envisioned the kind of weaponry that exists on the south side of Chicago or at a nightclub in Orlando?
The Second Amendment wasn't written about what type of firearm you could have. The Second Amendment was clearly written and put in place to keep the government in check.
I think it's important to remember that the founders also put in place several layers of government to continue to interpret that document based on what's informing it today. Second Amendment's not going anywhere, but that right is also not limitless, right? It's the same reason you can't buy a Black Hawk helicopter and fly it into Washington, D.C.
Another controversial issue many are talking about these days, red flag laws. Court-ordered gun confiscation from people deemed dangerous.
States that have enacted specific legislation that helps to prevent people at a high risk for committing acts of violence from getting their hands on firearms have seen a reduction in violent homicides by 36%.
You seem skeptical about red flag laws.
Well, red flag laws is not going to stop the next mass shooting or any other shooting.
But what would be the harm in a federal red flag law?
The risk is disarming law-abiding Americans without due process. You don't even know if they committed a crime, but yet you're going to go into their home, you're going to disarm them, you're going to force them to go to court, pay fines and fees to prove themselves innocent of something they haven't even done. They haven't even committed a crime.
If I can offer a story, the shooter at Pulse had on several occasions done things that to other people looked like he was a danger to himself and others. So on multiple occasions, there were these warning signs, there were red flags that told people that this person was potentially violent. There was no law that would say if I went to the police and told you that this person is potentially dangerous, they could then go through the process of getting a court order to remove their firearm. And then when somebody shows up to a nightclub holding an assault rifle, can we truly be surprised that we have known all along?
There's more to the conversation. When we come back, we talk about the calls to restrict high-capacity magazines and the one thing that they both agree on. We'll be right back.
We're back on the third hour of Today with more from our new series, United Today. Real people having tough conversations without all the yelling.
Yeah, we've been hearing from Pulse nightclub shooting survivor Brandon Wolf and Rhonda Ezell, an NRA member and founder of Chicago Guns Matter. We're picking up the conversation with one hotly debated proposal. So you don't think any legislation would stop?
Because at the end of the day, we could have all the legislation on the book that we want. What prevents an individual from getting up, walking out the door, choosing to commit that crime? We have red flag laws. We have a federal firearm licensing law. We have an AR-15 ban in certain municipalities. We have a magazine ban in certain municipalities. And yet, we still see the shootings and killings. We're the third largest city in the nation. Yeah. We're in the news every day because of the shootings. This is a prime example. It doesn't matter where you put the situation. This is a fact shown and proven that the laws exist and they are not working.
I agree that the laws that have been put into place in Chicago and other municipalities are not as effective as they could be. So if I can go from Chicago, drive 3 hours to Indianapolis, pick up a gun of any kind that I want and come back, what is the purpose of having the law in Chicago and not across the board? That is an argument for federal legislation that puts these laws across the board. It standardizes everything, not a patchwork, a mishmash of things.
The conversation moved to the attempts to restrict high-capacity magazines used in some of the deadliest shootings, including Newtown, Pulse, Las Vegas, and Dayton. What about restricting?
Why are you restricting? If a person had a 10-round magazine and he carried 10 of those, he still have 100 rounds.
But I can tell you that in Dayton, Ohio, if a person had a 10-round magazine and the police officers were able to stop him in less than 30 seconds, 35 people would not be killed or injured.
Las Vegas. I mean, you look at Las Vegas and you look at the cache of weapons that guy had and the ammunition.
Well, he had a clear advantage. He was a high ground. He was in a location that he had planned this out for months. So we can't force it into this space where we want to make it fit, because nobody stood a chance that night at that concert. Not with that guy. And even if the laws existed, he still had broken them, right? Because it was the choice of the individual. It was his actions, right?
Where do you think we are 5 years from now on this topic?
Same place.
You're not optimistic?
Not at all. Because it's, like I said, once it goes back to money, politics, and power. When we're talking about coming to finding some common ground, what works, it has to work for everybody, not just one group of sad people.
You know, if Pulse taught me to be anything, it was to be optimistic. You have an entire population of people who spent their childhoods underneath desks pretending that a mass shooter was outside and figuring out how to survive. I think what you're going to see over the next 5 and 10 years is that generation, that population of people saying enough is enough.
Are either of you willing to accept that this is just going to be the new normal for this country?
No, I can't do that. And I think that before June 12, 2016, I had accepted this world as the status quo the way it was. I had accepted that I'd be the person who turned on the TV and watched coverage of a mass shooting and then flipped to the Food Network 5 minutes later. And now that I've seen 49 people, including 2 of the people that meant the most in the world to me, have their voices ripped from them, from something that I think is solvable, I simply cannot accept this as normal or the status quo.
Well, you know, whether or not we accept it as normal, if the people that have been put in place to do their jobs don't do their jobs, we will find ourselves here for a very long time.
We agree on that.
You do agree on that?
Yeah.
As we head into 2020, what do you want other people to glean from this?
You have to be willing to sit down and have an open mind. Just because you may not share the same ideas or you may not agree with an individual 100% doesn't mean that you can't put it all out on the table and say, look, let's have a real discussion between real people not what we're being fed and what we're being told to believe. How do we feel as a person?
My hope is that people are willing to break through their ecosystems. They're willing to get off of Twitter, get off of Facebook, and go have a conversation with your neighbor. Have a conversation with the person in the coffee shop. Have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you.
So does either one or do both have a solution that they kind of agreed on together?
You know, no. I mean, no. The short answer is no. They don't have a solution, but they do think, they both agree on this idea that lawmakers should do something.
Yeah.
That something has to be done.
But if you're not willing to give an inch, so, you know, she's on the South Side, she's in Chicago, and she's like, look, there's all sorts of shootings going on. I want to be protected. You have people who are hunters who want their guns, right? So if they agree that we don't want the guns in the hands of somebody who, you know, has some mental health issues, then if you agree on that, then how do you get there if you don't take a step, is my question. But nobody wants to take a step because you feel like that's giving in.
Your rights, yeah.
So how do you get there if you won't move? Like, I don't.
That's one of the questions. But we're going to continue to have the conversation over the next year. And not just on guns. We're going to continue to talk about some other complicated issues.